a lot of folks in the search marketing business like to talk about organic SEO as being free traffic. You know, they even sometimes pitch it that way as a way to sort of almost replace the paid, right? So here's how much the clicks cost in the paid environment, and we'll do the work and get you to the point where you can get that traffic for free. Well, usually they're not doing the work for you for free, so it's really not free. It's just the cost structure is different. And the fact that you're all here today proves that it's not free, right? Because you've already spent some money just to be here to learn how to do it, so already there's a cost associated with organic search. So whether you choose to do it in-house, you choose to hire others, that's going to be very much an individual decision. It'll depend on the resources that you have available, how geeky they are, and how close to optimal SEO you already are. So we'll talk more and more about that as we get further along. There are names to the different spiders that go out and visit your sites. You can actually see those spider names if you look at your log files or use web analytics. Log files and web analytics actually tell you every time that a spider comes and visits your site. So they also tell you every time a human visits the site. They're really great. Analytics and web analytics and log files are what web marketers and webmasters use to get an understanding of the behaviors that people are engaging in right before they get to the site, as well as once they arrive. So there's a lot of information in there in your log files or using your web analytics package that can help you understand sort of how you're doing from an SEO perspective. Because if you're seeing that spiders aren't visiting, for example, then you have no chance, right? Because if the spiders never show up, then they've never seen any of your content, and you're sort of already at a huge disadvantage. Whereas if you see the spiders are showing up, but you're not getting your listings up high, well, then maybe you just some tweaks you need to do so that the spiders can better understand where which pages you have are relevant for particular search queries. Yep.
How often should you see? What's normal?
There is really no normal. The question was, how often should you see spiders visiting? They've become more frequent in general. So Google actually has a daily spider that goes out. MSN tries to visit daily. Yahoo not so much on a daily basis yet. And they actually make the case, they look at it on a case-by-case basis. So what happens is, if Google comes back to a site, let's say monthly for a while, and every single time it comes back it sees the content is different, it might visit it a little more often to see if the content has been changing the whole time in between, which means that it wants the fresher content. It doesn't want to be misrepresenting what's on a page because it only visits it every month. Sometimes Google will kick the site up into the daily spider rotation because it sees this stuff's changing almost every day. I should be visiting this all the time because it's like a news site. So if you think about all the news sites, there are some news sites that Google visits every hour because it wants the freshest content. And it doesn't want to even wait a day. So it decides the frequency of visit based on how often the content changes. You can't really get a non-news site more frequent than daily, but you can get a non-news site sometimes bumped up to the daily spider. That doesn't give you a huge advantage, but it does at least give you somewhat of an advantage because as you're trying new things and as you're writing new copy, it's more likely first that the engine will find it, and secondly, if you made a change and you notice more traffic coming in after you made that change, well, do more of that. So it sort of allows you to experiment a little bit more when you're on a more frequent spider rotation. Yep.
Sort of two-part. Does that mean that your content will encourage spiders to come back?
Over time, changing content will encourage spiders to come back. Now, there's no set rule that if you change your content a lot, it'll take 3 months and then you'll be kicked up to the more frequent spidering. It's just sort of a general best practice is that when you have fresher content, eventually the spiders learn that there's fresher content here, maybe I should come back more often. However, they make that decision based on other variables as well. So if it doesn't believe your site is reputable, and we'll talk about how they measure reputation, then the changing content more frequently is not going to influence the spider coming back more frequently. However, if it thinks your site is extremely reputable, then it may only take a few times of new content being there when the spider shows up before it kicks you up to the daily. And we'll talk about that when we talk about reputation. Yep?
If you make changes and submit the information yourself, will that prompt the spider to visit your site more?
Usually, submission of URLs to the search engines doesn't really make as much of a difference as it used to. I mean, they'll still take submissions, and they may actually go back and visit a page based on a submission. But we've found that it's far more important to just have links to that new content from your homepage if it's not your homepage, or links to it from external places, if it is your homepage, because that's really what the spiders do, is they follow links. So rather than use one of those, respond to one of those spam emails that you get about submit yourself to 3,000 search engines, it's really that the engines are so aggressive now because they want to be the biggest that unless you're completely off the radar, they'll find the content that you put out there. So submission is really not a big driver of change with respect to organic SEO.
Quick question, Kevin.
Yep.
Will spiders show up in a log file as an IP, a domain, and Yahoo is too? Why don't they crawl the other?
Spiders will usually identify themselves in addition. There are lists that will tell you what IP addresses spiders come from, but they also identify themselves. And I'll actually show you what some of those look like. And you can actually see it in your log files. So what do the log files tell you? They tell you who visited, whether it was a spider, whether it was a human, what they looked at. Often you can tell why they came, because if they came from another site and it was a search query, it'll actually show you what they searched on right there in the log file. It'll show you how much they looked at. In other words, how many different pages on your site did they look at, how long they stayed on your site, whether they stayed and took an action or an activity that you wanted them to, like a registration or a purchase, and what the last page was that they looked at before they left. Because basically, if there's a particular page request in the log file and then nothing after that, you have to make the assumption that they left. So it also tells you some information about them, because their IP address tells you what ISP they use. Sometimes it tells you geography. Sometimes it tells you what company they're at. We'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. So here's actually a snippet of a web blog. I think the one that I took was out of one of my wife's sites. So this is actually 3 different elements out of a log file. I cut and paste different visits so that I could show you some specific requests. Excuse me. So the first one shows you the IP address, the date, and what that is that's the Yahoo Seeker spider. And you can see the first thing it asked for was actually a particular file type, which many of you probably don't even have on your server, which is called a robots.txt file. What a robots.txt file is for is it's to tell the robots if you don't want particular pages on your site in the index. So if there's certain stuff that's sensitive information, and you don't want the search engine spiders to see it, you can put those, follow the standard convention in your robots.txt file and tell the search engines to disallow that page. Most people don't bother putting a robots.txt page on their site because they want the search engines to capture everything. But it's sort of good robot etiquette for it to ask for the robots.txt file from your server, regardless of whether it's there or not, just so that it can read it and see if there's anything that you didn't want spidered. The second one was actually the Google bot showing up. And in this case, I had it showing a request for the index page. And the way it asks for that index or home page is it just asks for /, which is the home page, right? So it's asking for that home page. And again, it identified itself as the Google bot and even tells you what version of Google bot it was. The third listing, actually you can see that it came in off of a search query because right there it shows you the search query and what it was. So I could take that search query and paste it directly into Yahoo and see the exact same thing that the person saw before they got to this site. So where that, not that anybody ever dives into their log files or has the time to dive into their log files at this level of granularity, unless you're just like bored and you want to see sort of how did people find my site exactly. You can go in and do that. It's very rare for people to actually get to see their log files, but it is fun if you just want to waste an afternoon. But what's interesting about this is, we can see that in Yahoo, a person came in off of having searched for Dr. Phil diet, and they came to the Dr. Phil diet page. You can see because it said get, and it gave the particular page there. And on the second one, which was a Teoma search, they came in on Dr. Phil weight loss book. And again, you can see the name of the file. So that's useful information. Almost never do you see it in its raw form, right? Usually what you see is a Web Trends, Omniture, or HBX report that sort of distills this information back into something that isn't going to overwhelm you with data. But the data comes from something that is very, very granular. So usually they'll aggregate, you got this many visitors from this search term, this many visitors from that search term. And often, some of the web analytics systems don't even show you the spider data because they assume you're only interested in human visitors, so they don't even have reports for spider data. Others will show the spiders in a separate category or a separate link or something like that within the report. So this is just, it's sort of useful to show it to you at the most granular level because this is where that data sort of comes from. Go ahead.